All right, we are live.
Good morning, good day, good afternoon, whenever you're listening to this, everybody. Welcome to the Atheist Republic Sunday morning hangout. I'm Makisha. With us so far today, we have Ali, Armin, Michael, Todd, Arif, and people will be dropping in and out, as you can see, as we go along if you're watching this live. Today we're going to be talking about, oh goodness, I lost my window. What are we talking about? Religion in the modern world, I believe. I'm pulling this from memory now, and I'm a bit tired. So we're going to talk about why and how religion gains a foothold in the modern world, particularly in areas such as politics and economics, and why it's so hard for secular thoughts, atheism, to gain that same foothold, to have the same voice. And we'll also talk a little bit about the growth of religion, growth of atheism, things like that. So people will be dropping in and out, as I said, if you're watching this live. If you are watching a recording, we'll have all the links that we talk about and everything below. And if you want to chime in, please tweet us, #Atheist Republic, and we'll try to catch you on there. So this was an idea that was talked about last week by Arif, actually. So, Arif, I'm wondering if you would like to maybe kick off with some thoughts, or maybe if you've been thinking about this particular topic since last week. I know it's kind of putting you on the spot, so you can say no, but I thought I'd start with you.
Sure. Hi. Thanks for organizing this. Thanks to Atheist Republic for continuing to organize this sort of kind of brainstorming and discussion ideas. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I think I mentioned this before in my other discussions, is that I'm not an academic. So although I may think kind of in a straight line, but my articulation may sound very raw and very rudimentary. So here goes. When we were kind of starting to discover the ways of atheism, for example, for me it was like 9-10 years ago. We at that time we thought atheism is something that is very up and coming, and this is going to be the future. Unfortunately, over the years, we have seen signs, and that I actually grown up as well to discover more of how the actual world actually works, or how we perceive the world. So what do I mean? I mean is how actually the world runs. I mean, obviously, as a lay person, when we grow up, we are subject to the surrounding of us, and then it's going to take a few minutes if you kind of bear with me while I go through this rant. So when we grow up, we obviously get a lot of different type of inputs from the society, from the media, and what is told to us as how the world exists. So, for example, I grew up in Bangladesh, and at that time, education was quite important, and we were told that if you work hard and if you learn hard, at some point the objective for us was to become something, to do a kind of a good job, be able to do a good job, and then establish yourself in the society. And then you one of the objective for male the boys was to get married to a nice girl from a nice family. So that was kind of the ultimate goal of somebody's life. So obviously we everybody was doing that quite hard. There was competition going on and everything. So at that time, religion in our life wasn't really important. That's one of the reasons I became atheist, because the time I grew up, I think between 80s and 90s, which is the biggest time when we kind of change and mold. At that time, Bangladesh, it wasn't really a big deal. And lucky for me, my parents didn't shove down religion through my throat. Then obviously I came to UK, and surrounding that time I started learning a lot about the bad things about religion, especially Islam. And right about like 4 or 5 years ago, I started seeing symptoms that religion is not as as helpless as we thought it would be, that atheists would suddenly start talking about religion and religion would just go away. It didn't work like that, and I saw that it has power, which is quite a lot of power in my view. And then I started thinking about where this power comes from. And I, obviously, being an atheist, I had a lot of friends in the so-called leftist circle, and they had a different worldview, which is more like a Marxist worldview, where it sees the world through a very economic way of running the world. I obviously, the leftist people have a lot of problems because their worldview is so also kind of structured and religious. They are stuck also in a Marxist era. They couldn't evolve and mold their life. So this is kind of the background and slightly snippet of it, because I didn't script it. It's may not make sense at this moment. So here goes. I think personally the way religion works is that it makes the people change in such a way that it doesn't start to think for itself. The person doesn't think for himself or herself, and that is a very good citizen. If you don't ask question, and if you fall in line, and if you just follow the instructions that is given to you at that very given time, you are a very good part of the population. Now that means atheists are actually obviously the black sheep, but also I think they're the fools. The reason I'm saying this, because the part of, if you're a religious person and you're part of a communion, you get all the benefits that comes with the religion. So that was obviously, in my view, was a small kind of an benefit that they used to get. But then I started thinking how the world, how the powers and economy and all these things starts to work. Then I saw that religion, although it may look like it's working in one level, and economy and power works in a separate level, they have very good relation. So power and economy needs people to be exactly what organized religion wants people to be: docile, submissive, and listen to instructions and fall for the the gullibleness that usually happens. So, and then obviously United Nations came out with this Article 19 saying that the human rights is quite important and humanity is going to be the way forward. But over the, for example, the whole year, we saw Saudi Arabia in front of everybody grabbing hold of vast part of Iraq, and then Syria, and then Libya, and creating its own kind of Islamic State. But everybody was talking around it, but nothing doing about it. That means America, even all the powerful nations were actually supporting that Islamic State. Then I realized that Saudi Arabia is kind of behind it, right? Islamic State, they want their extension. Although initially it started off. I don't want to get too much detail into this, but the whole point is religion is has got friends in places, in very powerful places. It's not just foreign policy. We used to think that, for example, Middle East issue is because of foreign policy and exert power. I think Saudi Arabia has got more power than we think it does, and it just doesn't exercise it. But recently, I think it did. It went into United Nations Human Rights Council, which we never thought it would go into, and then we realized actually United Kingdom did a deal with Saudi Arabia. I mean, can you imagine the worst country in the world for human rights records is now kind of a very important part of Human Rights Council. Then we saw Saudi King first time went into America and did his first tour into Americas, and then followed by the Pope. So, and then we saw Havana. Used to be Cuba used to be a very strong Marxist type country. It has now got a consulate of America. It just doesn't. It's not a world order change. And apparently the Pope had a very important role to play. We saw Russia, which used to be Soviet Union, has Russia is still there, but it's now fallen for the Orthodox Church. That means church and religion has become a very important power. We saw the same thing in Bangladesh. Although we thought secularism is Bangladesh's own foundation, it's no longer it is. So all these things joined together. As an atheist and as part of an atheist movement, I don't think the immediate future is not that great for atheism or humanism in a nutshell. So that's my rant. I don't know how much I made sense of it, but I'll give the mic back.
That was all really good. Thank you. One of the things I wanted to sort of echo back, and Ali said that was amazing. Yes, it was. It's very, very articulate for something that you said it was not very well scripted. One of the things that I picked up on that I completely agree with, and I've experienced this myself and said this many times when I was actually in the religious world, is a sort of stunted development that often happens with religious people. And I usually said it when I was running religious nonprofit board meetings, because I would see really intelligent, articulate adults who are respectful and able to communicate things out in the real world, doctors and lawyers, and they come into the church or the synagogue and they sit down at a board meeting and they act like children. And it was very bizarre for me to observe. Like literally, they appear as though they have like a stunted growth process or something going on. And I saw this so much that I started to develop a kind of philosophy about or a belief about how religion requires people to remain as children, not just in the simplicity of their faith, but or their convictions, but actually developmentally, emotionally, almost as children. And I thought that was an interesting observation you made, and you said so many other great things, but that was one thing that I caught on. Armin, I know that you had mentioned the myth that atheism is gaining ground, and it might be a good time to talk about that a little.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that, especially in Western countries, they look at the trends, they look at people's opinions changing about gay rights, about religion, about secularism. It feels to them that times are changing and humanism and secularism is winning. But I think what they're looking at is they have a very local perspective. They're looking at United States, they're looking at England, they're looking at Ireland. Unfortunately, if you look at it globally, the trend is that Islam is actually winning. Atheism as a percentage in the next 50 years, based on, I mean, these estimates are not 100% reliable, but it's the best we have. But Islam is growing not because people are converting to Islam. It's just because people in Islamic countries tend to have more population growth than people that in countries that are more secular. So Islam is growing as a percent, both in total numbers and as a percentage. Atheism, it seems like globally, is going to actually shrink as a percentage of total global population. Christianity is going to stay relevant, stay the same. In the United States, however, atheism will grow as a percentage, and that's what is giving people the illusion that atheism is winning. But the thing is that not only the main reason why we have to change our perspective to a more global view rather than a local view is that we're going to even be more connected than before. As we go forward, the ideas are going to travel much more freely and much more easily, and the impact of people's opinions halfway across the world is going to have a huge influence on opinions everywhere else. It's not about terrorism or security and that stuff. It's also about a battle of ideologies. What we have done in successfully in United States and Canada, and this is relative to other places, is that we have even our religious community is much more integrated with the rest of the community. But the thing is that the religious, I'm just gonna wait for the okay. Philip, can you mute your microphone? Here, I'll mute it for you. There you go. No worries. And no worries for being late. People could join in halfway through the conversation. That's always fine. Yeah, so we were saying that the Muslim organizations are doing a very, very effective job on social media. They are, a lot of people say that secularism is winning because it's the age of information and ideas get spread faster and more easily, and it's harder to keep people in bubbles. But the thing is that a lot of Islamic organizations, they're adapting. They know that creating walls for information is not as effective as it used to be. So the new strategy is to create noise. So it's not just the age of information, it's also the age of misinformation. There's so much content out there. Content is being created much faster than before. And it's not just about providing your right content, is also about who's more effective at reaching out to people, and not only reaching out to people, but also making people effective at recognizing bullshit from not bullshit. But the thing is that without that skill, your message is just going to get drowned out in all the other content that is being shared out there. And the thing is that the sheep-like mentality of a lot of religious people really helps them their spread on social media, because first of all, they're very well funded. We Atheist Republic has one of the largest atheist pages online. We have more than 1 million followers. And that's, for a lot of atheists, that seems very impressive. But if you look at, for example, Islamic pages, there are many pages that have more than 1 million followers, and there are also many that have more than 4 million followers, and more. And for when they post content, it's a lot more engaging, because people kept, like on Christian pages, people kept posting, praise God or stuff like that, and on Islamic pages, people keep posting subhanallah, and people think it's their religious duty to share those things, and those send huge social signals to Facebook, and these posts usually shows up on people's feed much more than our content. So it just basically drowns us out, because not only they have more followers, for Facebook, those content seems even more engaging, so it shows up more on people's feeds. It does matter, because even when that means when young generation, when they come on social media, even now with the social media, they're still protected by this noise, this wall of noise, and it's really hard to penetrate through that. So we need to figure out better ways to reach out to these people, and it's not about telling them to forcing them to see our content. It's about letting them know that we are there if they're interested, and creating content that even if they don't agree with, creating content that they would be interested in engaging with, and also telling their other friends about it. Because it's our hope is only with the young generation, because what the Islamic communities have going for them is two things: it's their growth population, and also creating a bubble for the next generation. The older generation, usually they have made up their mind. It's really rare for them to change their mind. It's mostly up to us to reach out to people that haven't yet completely made up their minds on things. But what we have for us is basically just social media, and we have to find ways to penetrate through that wall, or else we're handing over our planet to dogmatic belief systems. Anyways, that's me.
Thanks. Arif, go ahead.
Hi, sorry to come back again. Right, obviously, when I initially mentioned that my speech wasn't scripted, I did then realize when Amir was talking that I left out a lot of bits, and I'm sure there will be other bits that I will be leaving out. So, what I wanted to kind of bring out is about how we saw some statistics, I think a week ago, or maybe even more recent, that there are statistics, like a census statistics, saying that young population is leaving religion in flux. That the so-called millennial generation is no longer interested in religion, and there's a huge kind of group of young people who will not actually be religiously needed. That is good news. But the bad news, I think, is, if we can step back a little bit, is how the world has now become. And as you know, the capitalism and everything has succeeded, and it's getting more and more towards an elitist society. I think at a later time, Philip might correct me a few things. But the world, the divide or the gap between the poor people and the rich people is getting more wider. That means we are now have a huge, not huge actually, we have a number of population who are extremely rich, and then we have a big, huge population who are quite poor, and they do not have enough money, and they do not have the resources to teach their children to go. That's initially when I said that at that time education was in Bangladesh was something important, which used to give us the impression that if you work hard enough and if you study enough, you can step through the ladders and become an elite or part of an elite. That was kind of the goal that was given to us. But these days, I think nobody is asking anybody that you are allowed, you can go to become an elite unless you born into an elite family. What I mean by that, I think the world design has changed due to technological change and achievements. The world do not need manual labor that much anymore. But it's got a huge population that it still need to keep engaged. But also it needs the population to be, again, docile and following orders. So that's why they are now creating a world that is through the education system reformation, that the young population that we're going to see maybe in 2 generation time will be really, really dumb. It's really bleak future, and I think. But if you look at how the education system throughout the world has been going downwards, the quality of education is usually, which means the product should be thinking people, but they're no longer actually that much of thinking people, and they're more into their social media, and they're more into their hip and trendy rubbish, but not really thinking so much. And then the most important thing you would notice, I don't know if in America it's already been like that, in England and in other places, I think I mentioned it before, that higher education has become now a commodity that only the elite can purchase. What I mean is people who actually runs the world, part of the, not the proletariat, but the top level, the bourgeois, are actually highly educated, highly skilled, and they are progressed through their elitist parenting and then support. That means whoever goes to the very top of any organization or any system are part of the elite system, and the rest is not. And that actually brings us to this thing that why atheists, I think, are in a bad shape, because whatever we say challenges the whole system. That means the system is afraid of us, because what the design that they're coming up with, the atheists are saying everybody should have proper education, everybody should follow science, not follow science as in be scientifically thinking, but the more you become scientifically thinking, the more challenging you become, because you see through the rubbish, you see through the bullshit, and then you become somebody who understands what the world is going through. That means us, the small atheist population already can see the bullshit, and that means the questions that they are asking is jittering the establishment, the so-called. I know I'm sounding a lot like a leftist, but I think I'm not stuck in the leftist thing, and my background is not leftist, but I think they do have some kind of common points that we can take. So I will end my rant here and let others talk.
If that's a rant, then I want more rants. Good stuff. Casper, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to touch on what our men said about the wall that's sort of built by religion, that's hard to break through, and what we can do to break through that wall. I'd like to focus on one of the posts that we made, one of the biggest posts that we've ever made, and it's drawn the most attention, which was the rainbow Kaaba. When we made that picture and put it up on Facebook, it had such a huge following and turnout. People just flocked to that, whether they hated it, whether they loved it. They just went straight to it, and everybody was sharing it and moving it around. And I think that comes back to this idea, like we often get sort of put down and bitched at for making these sort of provocative claims and these sort of provocative memes, and people are like, why are you mocking my religion? Why are you doing that? But the thing is, like our men said, there's a wall there, and we have to get through that wall. One of the best ways to get through that wall is to just reach over the wall and slap somebody in the face. And it's not always pretty. It's not always nice. A lot of people, atheists included, are not going to like us doing that, but that's how you get people's attention. You reach over that wall and slap them in the face, and you say, look here, look at this, look what it did. You know, look at all the people that threatened us, physically threatened us with violence. Look at the people who took a different view at their own religion and said, yeah, hey, maybe we should drape the Kaaba in a rainbow flag. You know, maybe we do need to be more inclusive. And we got that message from plenty of Muslims out there. So it's one of those things where if we're really going to have an impact, we have to understand that we do have to wade through a lot of bullshit to make that impact. And the best way to wade through that bullshit is literally to make waves, to be just outspoken, and yes, we're gonna be, we're gonna mock your religion. We're gonna point out the most horrible aspects of your religion and go, look at this bullshit, look at it. And I think that's kind of what we need more of. We've got people like C.J. Whirlman out there telling everybody that secularism is a threat to people, when in reality, all we're trying to do is wake people up, wake them up to the idea that there's bullshit that they're just buying into, and they need to take a step back and actually look at it. And we need that shock value. I mean, that's kind of what Islam has. When you see on certain Muslim pages and they post ISIS videos of people beheading people, people flock to that shit. Whether they like it, whether they hate it, they flock to it. And that's one of those things. They have the shock value. They're able to wake people up and say, hey, look at us. Is that a good thing on their part? Well, for them, it's a great thing. For us, it's horrible. It's horrible. And we have to find some way to combat that with our own sort of shock value. And I tend to try to do that a lot. I try to reach out and slap people. It's not always received in the greatest way, but I'm not going to stop doing it. And I don't think we can let others out there, especially in our community, tell us that we're being dickheads for doing that. I mean, there's different tacks to it, and to understand that there is a wall and there is a barrier that we have to break through. You have to understand that there's different ways of doing it, and we have to all do what we're good at doing. I'm very much for the shock value. I would love to shock people because they wake up. So.
Thanks, Casper. It seems like there are a few different threads that we're kind of picking at. Some are social media directed, and some are more policy oriented in terms of education and politics and such. But I think it's interesting to hear all those, where people end up focusing on in terms of where the need is and where the activity is happening. Philippe.
I hope you can hear me. Okay, so well, the fact is that about what Casper just said, perhaps we need to have our stone wall, to have something big where atheists just put a statement that we are here and you have to count with us, and we are not negligible quantity wherever in the world. That would be quite an impact. And just like Armin said, we don't have money. We don't have the social network to have the same kind of impact, so we have to be more clever. But what's really appealing to people, I think, it's about religion or the plot theories, etc. It's because it's simple. It brings simple answers to complex questions, and people are very at ease with simple answers. And it's not only because of education. I have some few examples. Well, the most interesting would be my dad, who was an engineer, a high-level engineer, and still, I don't know where you put that, in the neurosis, in the fear of death, whatever. But the whole his life he's been looking for a simple answer to everything in life. So he's been doing like all martial arts, yoga, he's been in a sect in India, etc., etc. All his life he's been searching for a simple answer to all those complex questions because he needed an answer. He was that kind of person who need an answer and couldn't live with that, with the answer that would be, we don't know, or we don't have answers. And a lot of people are like that. Just can't stand this idea that we don't know. It's just like, yeah, I had an encounter yesterday night with a young lady. She's 33. She's in the 30s. She don't seem to be dumb, and suddenly she's like, I don't believe in evolution. I mean, we're in France. She's been educated. She's like, I don't believe in evolution. She's just said, I don't understand how it's impossible. I was, what's impossible? You say there must be something to make us pass from monkeys to click humans. It's not a click. It's not a switch to put the light on like just eureka. No, it's not. It's an evolution and some animals. So I started a rant or whatever. And it's terrible to see somebody who looks reasonable, clever, educated, etc. start to say something so stupid. So I told her, so you don't believe in gravity theory? And she was like, this is not the same thing. And basically what she was stating is that gravity, I can test it, so I understand it. But evolution, I don't understand, so it doesn't exist, or I just can't wrap my mind around that. And that's the problem. It's that skepticism and education, yeah, tend to push people to outside of religion because it's real bullshit, and when you open your eyes, I mean, it's so obvious that, okay. But sometimes it's not enough, and education do preparation work, but there is something more that we need to understand. It's why clever people still believe in that bullshit. What's the trigger? What's the button that makes them stick to that, like their life depends on it? So that would be no. And perhaps it starts the problem with education and the fact that I see kids now, and they're like 3 or 4, and people are asking their opinions, their parents, what do you want? Choose, etc., etc. And before, you were authorized to talk about a subject when you've been known to understand and to know a little about the subject. Now, a lot of people and the media, for example, ask people their opinion about subject they don't know about anything, and they feel authorized to give their opinion on subject and matters that they don't even understand. Perhaps that's a problem too. That's for me.
Thanks, Philippe. The last point you made, all really good thoughts, and the last point you made really gets me every time is the whole, we seem to be, and I don't know if this is true or not, I always feel like such an old person when I say things like this, but it seems like more and more we are compulsively, obsessively driven to give equal time to all perspectives. And the reality is that not all perspectives are equal. Just because I know something to be true based on scientific observation and process, and then maybe there's like a whole bunch of us that also know this to be true, but there's one or two people that have a completely different perspective based on their feelings. Just because I'm a person and they're a person and we want equality doesn't mean their perspective actually deserves equal time or equal weight. And it seems like we've really lost that in terms of like media culture and how we want to actually hear from the people who have fringe views and give them more time than the people who know things to be scientifically true and accurate. We want to hear the wackos for an hour and a half and give 5 minutes of screen time to the person who wants to talk about science. And that's madness to me. And I think it really is distorting the perspective, particularly of younger people who are hearing all these sound bites and getting all of this misinformation, because it makes you feel like what gets more screen time is more true or more right. And that lack of critical thinking that comes from not being taught how to think critically from a very young age is not allowing them to push back against what they're hearing. And so they're just soaking it all in, and it's like, you know, that person, that particular view must be more right because it's gotten an hour and a half of screen time, whereas this other view only got 5 minutes. So all opinions are not equal. There's no such thing as equal time, and that whole phrase makes me crazy. Allie is next.
So there's a lot of points that I wanted to jump into. One was the end of Philippe's talk here with us, where he asked why, you know, if people are well educated and you know, they live in a more secular society, how can they still believe this crap? And basically what it comes down to, ultimately from my local perspective, which is Southern America, it's indoctrination, and I don't care if it's indoctrination from a secular country, you know, or here in the States. When a child is told from a very young age, you cannot think for yourself, you are worthless, you're a sinner, you're this, you're that. Thoughts of evolution, that's scary. That is completely against everything I was raised to believe. My father, I don't talk to him anymore, but last I checked on his LinkedIn profile, still works for NASA, literally a rocket scientist, raised me to believe that evolution was not real, that there were aspects of evolution that we could look at and see why that theory was presented, but creationism all the way. So there are very educated people that still fall for this, and to ask why, you have to look at indoctrination. Aside from that, and I make this joke often with everybody, is the money. The money that's involved is huge. We have a mega church here, well, not here in my town, because the mega church is actually, I think, bigger than my town, where they're their own community. And they make millions of dollars off of your guilt. Millions of dollars for telling you that you're a sinner, you're disgusting, and the only thing that's going to save you from it is me. So everyone runs to give their money. Everyone runs to do that. They're also told that atheism, anything that allows them this kind of freedom is bad, is wrong. So we're having to combat these beliefs that you know, we're the bad guys. We're out to steal their salvation. we're out to make them believe that God's not real, so that because we're the devils on the earth. And again, this is a local perspective. And so that's why the fight is so hard here, right? Because they can run off and they can play with us, but they can get their salvation on Sundays when they're horking over their millions of dollars to these mega churches. I make the joke all the time whenever I want to talk about making money with someone. Our dating site, for example, we can make L. Ron Hubbard kind of money, or this guy is so rich he's Joel Osteen kind of money. Whenever you have that much of a success in something, it's almost tempting as well. I can imagine if somebody here wanted a retirement plan, whenever you're 60 years old, write a few books on atheism, move to America and tell everyone you've converted back to religion. You found God. You would make millions. You would make millions on your book of converting back to Christianity. And because there's so much money to be had in this crazy organization, that's just going to keep people roped in. There's just money is power, and we've all heard the things that run the world, right? Sex, power, and money. And these are all things that the church controls. They control you by making you feel so guilty about sex. They have the power over you, and you give them your money. So how can atheism succeed through this? Casper brought up a great point. We reach over the wall, we slap some people in the face. Yeah, okay. But I think we also need to hit it from another angle as well at the same time, and that would be to teach people that these things that they fear, the power that the church has over them, is really nothing. Right now I'm hitting hard with virginity, right? Virginity is nothing. It's something that you're born with. You're also born with atheism, even if you're a Christian, if you're Islamic, whatever. You're born an atheist. You're also born with virginity, and virginity is nothing. And they use that to hold over you, to keep that power on you from a very young age. So we have to kind of fight these indoctrinated beliefs in Christians to let them know, hey, that's really nothing. The reason why you're going to church because you think you're going to hell is for nothing, because it's really not that big of a deal. And I think that whenever we start hitting them there, plus hitting the other people on the other side of the fence with slaps in the face, with our rainbow-colored kabbas, that's the way that we're going to succeed in taking people out of this whole terrible cycle of religion.
Thanks, Allie. Really good thoughts. Next, we have Todd.
Glad Allie brought up the different avenues that we need to hit this thing, and the different ways that we can do it. Being as far as shock and that kind of thing, I was about to say full frontal assault, but that gets into a little bit maybe a different area. I'll just say frontal assault to omit the full frontal phrase. But that's one technique that works for some people. For other people, it just makes you sound like an asshole, and they're going to tune you out. So we have to have those others, and just to say that one's better than the other, no, they're just different. They appeal to different people. As far as and she hit on something there. There's a lot of cultural things that we're dealing with, some entrenched cultural things. The success of the mega churches, success of people, that kind of thing. That really boils down to just an appeal to consequences. And a prime example and a prime illustration is some of the things that I've heard about Donald Trump, particularly Jacqueline Glenn did a video about some of the things that are the people in the Iowa area that were talking about Donald Trump. And well, he's wealthy and famous, so he must be smart. That's the same kind of erroneous thinking that goes in with the Joel Osteens and that kind of thing. Well, he's rich and famous. There must be something to what he believes. He must be onto something there. Must be onto some truth. The flip side is where you have people, and I have people who are like this too, that are constantly on me about, if you're going to be an atheist, then just be quiet about it because something bad may happen to you. The subtext there being God may do something to you if you piss him off because you're talking too loud about not believing in him. And that's the same kind of horseshit fallacy, the post hoc fallacy. After this, therefore because of this. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. So we're dealing with a lot of erroneous thinking. One, two, I think made up some good points as far as education, indoctrination, that kind of thing. But whenever it gets down to man in the street, I think another thing that we can't discount is just simple laziness, simple path of least resistance. People have an innate bias toward preference of certainty, or at least people who are convinced of something. They sound like they're pretty sure. They sound like they've got a hold of something. I need to hear them. Path of least resistance. Skepticism takes effort. It takes time. And if you're trying to tell me something, if you're trying to convince me that evolution is true, whenever I may not necessarily agree with you, why should I give that much? Why should I give that much thought? What consequences does that have to me? I think the Islamic groups and Christian groups and that kind of thing are pretty effective, because threats of death, violence, and social sanction are pretty fucking good incentives to action. They override that innate complacency. And plus, they're getting back to what was said before. There's this whole information overload, so they're creating bubbles. They're creating those fields. And another thing was that just the equal time thing. There's a lot of and I think that goes down to questioning things too. Whenever you're talking to people, just questioning things, and they tend to get very defensive very quickly. And there's this tendency to conflate the value of individuals with the value of ideas. I think individuals should be respected till they give you a reason not to. Ideas, no. Every idea is open to criticism. I don't care who holds it or how dearly they hold it. If I think it's horse shit, then I'm going to say, hey, maybe it's horse shit. Let's talk about the possible horse shititude of what you hold so dear. Now I could do that in a number of different ways, of course. I could do the frontal assault. I could do something more subtle. That's going to be dictated by the conversation, by the temperament of the person, and what they seem to be open to, that kind of thing. But I think engagement on all these different fronts and all these different ways is absolutely vital. If we're going to change, the changes is going to come from the bottom up, really. If you want to, because ultimately, getting back to Arif's thing, the governments they're not interested in philosophical rigor. They're interested in social order. And as long as you're quiet, and as long as you're not raising four kinds of hell about something, they really don't give a shit. Just don't break the law and pay your taxes, and we'll get along fine. I really don't care what you believe. Say what you want to say. Have those discussions, whatever you like. Make a buck or two in the meantime if you can. Just slide me 75 cents of it. That kind of thing. To me, and for me, that the best way to attack that, to those kinds of social things, has never been to take the supply away, to shut down the avenues where all these ideas are coming from. Don't take the supply away, just take the demand away. And I think that's coming back to what Ali had mentioned, what some others had talking to, and Casper touched on it as well. That's how we do it. Engaging these people, challenging their complacency, challenging their indoctrination, challenging their deeply held beliefs, and if they wake up, and hopefully they will, we have, so that there's certainly evidence that it can happen, and it does. That to me would be much more effective, because it would take the demand away. They don't have to go to the bullshit faucet anymore, because they're not interested in it anymore. And eventually those avenues will dry up, because nobody's going to them, nobody's paying tithes, and they're having to close their doors.
Thanks, Todd. Let's hear from Michael.
Hi. I was going to sort of talk about contrasting situation in England with other things that people have said, but then I had a little thought popped into my head, really, that probably answers the main question. I think the problem that we've got is that we tend to forget, and we tend to be very complacent with the fact that churches have been playing this game of politics for thousands of years, and they're fucking brilliant at it. They know exactly how to mess with people's minds. They know exactly how to pander to what people want to hear. It's their stock in trade. It's what they do. It's all they do. And they have been playing this game for millennia. And I think the only example I can give of how we can actually take them out is to look at the progression in basically where I come from. I mean, it's the only real perspective I can offer, and that is that we forget that Europe was largely a Christian theocracy right across Europe. It was either Catholicism or then emerging Protestantism. In the case of the UK, there was the famous Henry VIII schism with the Catholic Church, which wasn't the same sort of Protestantism as you got in, say, Germany with Martin Luther. It was kind of a political convenience thing of, right, screw this, we're not being governed by Rome. We're an island nation, and I'm going to be the defender of the faith, so I'm going to just mess about, says Henry VIII. And then that seemed to slowly just gradually just become more and more secular. I mean, there was the horrible sort of inquisitions and so on that Britain very much had its own inquisitions under Mary Tudor, and then there seemed to be this sort of move to more, right, okay, we don't want that again, and it's kind of fizzled out over the last 300 years or so, to the point where really now I would say the church as a political force in the UK is at its weakest it has ever been, simply by just bloody well ignoring them. That every time they bring up a justification for an argument that they want to put forward that's based on, well, God says, we just say, I don't give a shit what God says. What is your actual reasoning behind your point of view? And Parliament seems to have done very, very well at just going, yeah, okay, yeah, you want respect for your point of view because you think that God says that gays shouldn't get married. But you know what? Actually, we don't give a crap whether you think God doesn't want gays to be married. What actual harm will it do if we allow gays to get married? God doesn't like it, but we don't care about that. And eventually that's how that change happened, was because people just went, I don't give a shit what you think. You know, you can say that you think that God doesn't. And a lot of people that actually even believe in God just turn around and went, how do you know God doesn't like it? I feel like God does like it. Because the church as a political force is largely spent. It still makes plenty of noise. It still tries to have its say, but nobody goes to church anymore in England, or very few people. Church attendance in the UK is pathetically low. It's about 5% of the UK population bothers to go to church on a Sunday anymore. Most people who claim to be Christian don't really pay it that much mind. They just kind of like feel this vague urge to get married in a church and get buried in a church with a priest saying some words, and they have a vague idea that there must be some sort of higher power. But really, when you get right down to it, they're not that bothered on a day-to-day basis and don't feel that burning desire to be governed by a religious say-so. And I think that is achievable if your government is strong in just going, don't care. Yeah, okay, you think God agrees with you. Prove it. We don't care. You know, you can say that God agrees with you. Fine. Why should that make any difference to us? And I think we have to address religion as a political force. We cannot keep on pretending that religion isn't a political force that needs neutralizing politically. And I think if we still treat it as this kind of like hearts and minds thing, we are being very, very, very naive in. I would very much echo what Armin said right at the very beginning. I think if you're dealing with a religion that still counts itself as government, in Islam there is no division between religion and politics. Religion is politics, and if we don't address that we are dealing with the same mentality as we dealt with in Europe 400 years ago when religion was politics. If we don't actually acknowledge that, and if we don't deal with it, then we will go under. We will lose that ground in the world where the religious leaders have suddenly realized, oh shit, secular people can actually win hearts and minds. Let's crush them. Let's hack them to death like we've seen in Bangladesh. Let's hang people from streets. Let's put heads on lampposts like we're doing in Syria and northern Iraq. And I think we have to pay very close attention to the fact that these people are astute politicians. They know what they are doing, and they see us playing at it and counter our every move very easily because they know how to make people afraid of what we're saying. And that ties into what Todd was just saying. They know how to appeal to the immediate consequences. The immediate consequences of saying, so what if you think God backs up your political point of view is fine, step over this way, we'll chop your head off. You shut up. You don't say a bloody word. You keep very quiet, and you are left thinking that you're the only person in the world that doesn't hold that point of view because everybody else is too busy nodding like little nodding dogs because they're all terrified. We've moved past that in Europe, but I think we can become complacent on it, and I think I would tend to agree with what Armin said right at the beginning. Hopefully that all made sense. That was a bit of a rant. I'm conscious of the fact that we've got about 2 minutes to the bell, so I shall shush and give Makisha the mic back.
Thanks, Michael. That was all really good stuff. I appreciate that insight a lot. And we are coming upon our last few minutes. As always, we can go a little bit over. We've got a few more people who want to share, but just be cognizant of the time. We are going to continue this conversation next week. Particularly, we would like to get into some conversations about power and politics, education and the media. We didn't get into a lot of that today, but a lot of really, really good thoughts and a good start. So we are going to continue. So if there's some stuff that that you would like to share next week, then maybe you can carry it over and talk a little bit more next week. But so next we have Arif, who I think it looks like can't join us next week. So because he always has so many good things to say, maybe we'll adjust our schedule on this. But we'll let everybody know. So Arif, then Casper and Philippe, and if you have any closing thoughts, everybody, just let me know.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I didn't realize this discussion is going to be such a fiery one, and it is really eye-opening. And as you said, we are only starting to scratch the surface of it, and so much is buried under, and we need to understand. And hopefully, once we understand this, maybe we can let everyone else know what's going on. I took some notes, and going to points made by Alice and Todd. I think the main problem here is these days is religion has too much surplus money at their disposal. Like in America, we know that they are tax exempt, and the way they have zero capital but yet make like 1,000 times profit, as you said, people's fear and their hopes and all the metaphysical things that they use as capital, and they make a lot of money. And what happens once you have your $1 million jet or anything? Once you have finished buying, what do you still do? You still have potload of money. You reinvest it in media. So a huge portion of media is actually owned by the religious bodies, and I think maybe we can discuss this in our topic when we discuss the part, on the segment or hangout when we talk about media's role. One of the things I wanted to also say about how we can turn it around is, I think at this point we are thinking of making a bigger atheist population. Like going forward, we talk to, as an individual level or maybe a small group level, we make more atheist people. But I think this thing can become a tsunami once we get. It's not something that I'm coming up with. I heard this before. Is that once we get general people involved, general people as in the kind of moderate religious people, once they get understand how their life is being affected by power of religion and power of politics colluding with religion, and their life being affected, and their life is turned into a shit life, and then they will understand that this needs to stop, and then become suddenly it will become a snowball effect. Now, and also in Saudi Arabia, obviously the whole problem of Islamic, should I say, fountain of power comes from their excess money from the oil selling money that they don't invest or anything. They just, Americans and other countries go in, dig up the oil, give them a little bit of money, but that little bit of money is still a huge amount of money. And Saudis have huge dawah. Dawah means kind of a preaching ministry, and they have huge amount of money to invest in media, in lobbying, in buying people all over the world. That means, in America, the biggest Christian power, and also some part of Vatican have got shitload of money, and obviously Saudis, they still have also. So if we can somehow find a way to cap their abuse of money, probably that will come to some sort of resolve. So yeah, that's what I thought I should just add, and thanks for organizing this again.
Thanks. The money thing is huge. It would be something we could probably talk about for quite a while. Let's see. Next, we've got Casper.
Okay, so I just wanted to make one last point here. Something that I've seen personally that I think we should address a little bit more is the fact that religion thrives on sound bites. They don't thrive on the actual doctrine. They don't thrive on the actual teachings. They thrive on sound bites, and that's what gains them their popularity. Here in the United States, we deal with this whole idea that well, you look at like people who support Kim Davis. Why do they support her? They don't support her because they believe in the doctrine and the ideology. They support her because people like Huckabee and Bill O'Reilly want to tell you that there's a war on Christianity, and they've coined that phrase, and they've got that soundbite out there, and people buy into that soundbite, and that little soundbite makes people gravitate towards that idea. I think that's something that we as atheists could capitalize on as well. I can write you a fucking 40,000 word book on why religion is wrong, but it's never going to have the same impact as when I have a 20-word quote that gets memed and spread across the internet. That's going to have more effect because people don't pay attention. They don't take the time to actually study stuff and look at stuff. They gravitate towards sound bites. And that's how religion has succeeded throughout the ages. They get good little sound bites and good little quips in there, and then people go, oh, yeah, that sounds great. I'm going to go with that, whether it makes sense or not. And you can combat that with as many words as you want, but unless you have a good counter sound bite, a good counter quip, it's not going to have as much impact. That isn't to say we shouldn't write the books and stuff, but that is to say that when we want to get the general message and when we want to draw people in, we need to be able to do it in 140 characters, like Twitter says. We need to be able to throw something out there that people are going to gravitate towards and go, oh, wow, yeah, that's a good point. What could I learn more about that? And I think that's somewhere we could put a little more emphasis on as a group, and I think we do a great job of that. But the atheist community in general, we have so much to say, and we tend to bloviate a bit, like I'm doing right now, and just prattle on about stuff. And I think we just need to draw people's attention more by just giving them the little bit of food for thought. that's going to make them want to reach out more and engage more.
Good stuff, Casper. Thanks. Philippe, why don't you wrap us up?
Quite a responsibility, viewing that have been said. It's quite difficult, but I'll try to wrap something. Well, I agree with Casper. We need to shock people, but perhaps not in our day-to-day lives. We should try to find a way to challenge the leaders, because people listen to the leaders. Just challenge them, just like each and all our leaders are doing. It's like when responsible for a church will say something, just try to find a way to catch him and to make a statement that I want to discuss that with you, and see how they react. Okay, we should have, perhaps what works really well, and one of the last blogs we had on the site was about laughing at them. It's so fucking effective when you have somebody who is just like, very serious about the way that you have to understand that it's out of context, and you're just like, what? Are you shitting me? In public, it's so effective because they don't have arguments really when you think about it. So perhaps about the money, we need to perhaps ask the Anonymous to drain the Saudis from their bank accounts and give it to us. That would be an idea.
Maybe we should add a hacker application to the Atheist Republic website.
I don't think anybody would complain if that is done.
That's awesome. All right, everybody, good stuff today. Really, everyone brought their A game, which is great because my brain is wine befuddled from the night before. So thanks, everyone, for coming. Thanks to our panel, again, for some really great, engaging thoughts. We will do a little bit of internal conversation about what precisely we want to talk about next week, but we do want to carry on this conversation at some point. To talk particularly about money, media, education, power, politics, all of these things. I think each one could probably take its own hangout, so we'll talk about how we want to shape that. And thanks all for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, please feel free to leave some comments, thoughts, questions below. You can email us, visit atheistrepublic.com. Speaking of money, these things take money to run. If Atheist Republic is valuable to you, please consider a financial contribution. You can do that through our website, atheistrepublic.com. Again, you can leave comments down below. You can email us. Lots of ways to get a hold of us through Facebook, Twitter, whatever. We love hearing from you, and we like sharing those things as well. We do have a newsletter. Please sign up for that. It's a good one. Comes out every week. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you again next week.